Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Nags Head Planning Board meeting, Tuesday, March 19th. First item of business is to approve our agenda for the day.
Can I make a motion to approve the agenda for the day?
Please.
With this deep voice, please.
He's like a DJ.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Moving on to public comment. I don't see anyone that wants to speak to us, so we'll move on from that to the approval of our minutes from February 20th meeting. May I have a motion to approve the minutes as submitted for February 20th?
So move.
Second.
We have motion and a second to motion. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Moving on to our action items. The first one will be a consideration of a text amendment submitted by Albemarle and Associates on behalf of Galassa Holdings to allow the long-term rental of units within existing hotels and motels.
Okey-doke.
Kelly's up, thank you.
Yes, and this will be really quick. We've had really good conversation about this at every meeting, but at our last meeting, I felt like we made a lot of progress and came to some consensus on a lot of items. So really, all I want to talk about this morning are the things that have changed. We've updated the staff report in 3 locations. We added some terminology in there following what Deputy Fire Chief Shane Height had told us to basically eliminate the conversation about, smoke alarms and interconnected smoke alarms and all of this, and just say that as part of the special use permit approval process that's going to be required if we want a transient hotel unit to be converted to long-term, that they're going to have to meet current North Carolina Fire Prevention Code standards. So every location is going to be different. Owens Motor Court is going to be different than Seahorse Inn or Roadway Inn or whatever. So instead of trying to articulate the language for each one, to just say that it has to meet current fire prevention code. And then we also had a conversation about the type of occupancy of these units, and noting that we have been working on a multifamily proposed ordinance, that as part of that, all units needed to be for long-term rental, and a percentage of them are proposed to be required for workforce housing, noting that workforce housing has been a topic of conversation and something that the town's been working towards, as to whether or not the applicant was going to be willing to dedicate a percentage of units to workforce housing. Mr. Galassa and Mr. DeLucia agreed, yes, that they would do 50% of those units as lease restricted in this case, instead of deed restricted, to workforce housing. So it now reflects 50% as lease restricted. And we talked about how perhaps the conversion to long-term as a special use was appropriate, but assuming that no changes had been made in the process that would increase the degree of nonconformity, that if they wanted to convert back to transient, that could be done administratively. We didn't have to go through that special use process again. So the proposed ordinance has been revised to reflect those things. I won't go through it unless you want me to. The other thing is, I sent you something late yesterday because it was noted that in my staff recommendation, I said it's likely consistent with the comprehensive plan. Usually when you look at the ordinance, you get a list of whereases and you get those policies that are consistent or inconsistent, and sometimes you get those that are vague and you can interpret. So I didn't include those in your consistency statement, your whereas statement, but I did provide those separately. I put a copy in front of everybody's computer because it was pretty extensive. I didn't know if everyone had a chance to read it since it came in so late. And then I can also put it up here on the screen. Happy to go through it one by one if you like, but in general, As far as all the policies that are included, the majority of them are consistent with the proposed text amendment. We speak to a need for land uses that serve the needs of both year-round and seasonal residents, supportive of mixed use, support the continued use and improvement of non-conforming properties, promote and expand types of housing and accommodations for varying income levels, aging populations, and the seasonal workforce within the town. So with this agreement to 50%, then we can now say it's consistent with that. Support and foster small local business that preserves and upholds the vision and legacy of the town. Enhance economic health, increase employment opportunities through business retention and expansion. And then there's several that I noted are, they're a little vague. They're questionable. Depending on how you interpret it, how you read it, it could probably go either way. Most of them, I think, lead towards consistency, but, as you go through the individual A, B, C, D, and E, you can extract from that as you wish. But all in all, I do feel like this is leaning towards consistency more so than inconsistency. So I hope that's beneficial for you. The only outstanding thing from staff's perspective is, like we've said, this kind of results in an apartment building scenario, and apartments are multifamily, and right now we don't currently allow multifamily. So whether you want to view this as a type of multifamily development or a different beast, and how much conversation you want to have around that point, I'll leave that up to you. But that's my staff report. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kelly.
Sure.
Does anybody have questions for Kelly? I don't know if I missed it just now in your report about the idea of a town goal or mission being able to maintain some motels and hotels.
Pardon?
Was that in the reference to the goal of maintaining some hotels and motels in the town, or not, that was one variety of housing that we wanted to?
Yeah, there is. There's, let's see here.
I mean, it's not a big deal. I'm just curious while we're looking over
Yeah,
the
no,
the
I'm scrolling
pros and cons,
through
so to
this we
speak.
can-
And on that subject, or while you're looking, I have a quick question too about the ordinance now reads that the applicant can change back to hotel motel administratively.
Yes.
So is there any, I think at one point we talked about how often they could do that, whether this would could turn into a situation, not would, but could.
I mean, it's a conversation. I guess we can talk about putting a number in there. Special use process to convert it to long-term. That's going to be a 3-month process. Administrative, if there's been no changes, that's going to take a week, 2 weeks max. So is this something, the conversion to and from, is that something that we anticipate people to do once or twice a year, once and never go back? You just don't know. So, I mean, if we can certainly put a limit on the number of times that you can convert to long-term back to short-term, long-term back to short-term. Happy to entertain that as well.
And I assume we'll hear from the applicant when people are done speaking with Kelly or asking questions, so he probably has something to say about that.
May I ask a question?
Of course.
I agree with sort of the direction in which Kelly's thinking was going with the going back and forth between long-term and transient. It probably wouldn't occur that much and probably very restricted to which facilities it can do that. So why would we want to limit the number of times that they may want to go from one to the other? I don't see it happening that often, but I'm of the impression that if it did happen or they requested the change, it would invariably be for a pretty good reason.
Potentially, I could see, I grew up in Virginia Beach. We had winter and summer rentals.
That's exactly.
So this, in the old days, when school went from, let's say, September the 1st through May the 30th, school teachers were able to rent houses in the resort section of Virginia Beach at a very reasonable price for 9 months. And then they went back to, those houses then went to weekly rentals for June, July, August. So that would be a potential scenario here.
Right.
And that's kind of my concern as well. If this becomes a seasonal, exception or flip from one to the other.
Now,
And-
I'm
And
sorry.
I'm not saying even that is all bad, but I just think since what we're looking at is basically a permanent conversion to, long-term stays in these, and then it gets into, for lack of a better word, an enforcement issue. How does anybody really know what's going on, including the applicant, if someone signs a lease and, and comes and goes, or somebody else is staying, or, what have you? So, and again, I'm not saying that it's even necessarily a bad thing, but I want to know what we're getting in, as best as we can. Because I think one of the challenges with it is that, it's all hypothetical.
Well,
We don't know what's going to happen.
And I'm not looking for trouble, but at the same time, if it becomes clear that the change of use starts to develop pattern, then it becomes normative, and if it falls outside of what we had kind of presumed to be the intent, then these are all concerning.
Right.
And I don't presume that the intent here is to do that. However, it could set a precedent going forward.
And this is the thing where we're looking at creating something for this use. The law of unforeseen consequences can find a whole other set of
Well, I mean,
stuff.
and actually, I did want to, so we're having good conversation. Does anybody else have specific questions for Kelly? Then we can give the applicant a chance, and then we can discuss.
I guess my only question for Kelly is down this road, if would there be some administrative, from where you sit, a way to keep this, what we're kind of casting out there as possibility, to keep it orderly? Because at some point, to make it not difficult to observe and enforce, or however you want to call it. Because even with the biggest thing that I heard, that it kind of down this road, obviously not the applicant, but you're going to have to review the leases.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of enforcement, I could envision annually, I think the best we're going to be able to do is to talk with Leor or whoever's managing it, ask for a copy of the leases, ensure that they're all meeting the definition of long-term, and ensure that at least 50% of them have language in the lease agreement that speaks to workforce. I don't think I have the staff right now to go in and say, okay, workforce means in Dare County, let me see some proof of that. That's probably getting beyond the scope of what our staffing is going to be capable of doing at this point in this scenario. But, you know, we can certainly ask for copies of leases, lease agreements, things of that nature. To your other question, I think, you know, I don't think it is the intent for, Mr. Galassa, but to do to do an annual conversion from short-term to long-term, from short-term to long-term, that could get overwhelming from the staff perspective and a little unwieldy if they're, you know, in my opinion, it's safe to say you do that conversion once or twice. If this is not a business model that's working for you, then you need to find what is and stick with it, you know? Like,
Right.
So how many times do we allow this conversion for them to be able to decide if this is or is not what they want?
We did agree, we all agreed, that there would not be mixed use, so you wouldn't have at the same time long-term and transient at the facility. Well, it would be very difficult to convert to transient if you've still got people residing there under a long-term lease. So it would be very impractical to wait until at least the very last lease ran out for long-term before you switched over to transient, because you'd be sitting on a lot of empty spaces.
So,
It would be an issue with timing and
Exactly.
fairness.
It-
Yeah.
assuming that you have enough occupancy that it's an issue. For example, this season, I think, because it's going to be hotel motel this season, if you will, this summer. So the switch would actually occur in the fall, and so that, you know, then you see who's coming in. And my question is, again, I guess I kind of share David's, or my comment is that there are a lot of seasonal uses. There's short-term uses. We had one response from another possible facility that said, oh, yes, we'd be interested in this, especially so we could put traveling nurses in the off-season. So those are short, you know, they're longer term than certainly nightly or even weekly, but they're generally 60, 90 days, maybe 100, you know, so it's still not long-term permanent housing, even though it would be, although, you know, then you get into the whole workforce thing. Sure, they're working here, but they don't work for someone who, you know, who's headquartered in Dare County. They're traveling, you know, so you get into all kinds of issues. But there are a lot of little bit longer-term transient type occupancies.
Well, I mean,
And if you filled the place, just for example, if you filled the place with, I'm just going to throw things out, lifeguards and people who work in restaurants and all kinds of other things, and then they're all going to leave as soon as the work falls off, and they don't, you know, or they go back to school or whatever it is they're doing. Just for one example. So I'm not so sure. And a lease, I think the ordinance says 90 days. So that's not terribly long time, really. That it becomes some version of transient.
True, but what's long-term defined as?
Right, 90 days, or
90.
by the Vacation Rental Act, it's defined as 90-plus days.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm not trying to quibble about that, but you could get in a situation where you have people for less than a year.
Right.
well, David's scenario of letting people rent for 90 days and then letting people rent long-term in the winter doesn't sound horrible. We let people do that in rental houses. People rent all summer and then you can rent for the winter. Like,
Right.
Is that a horrible situation?
No, I
No.
don't think it's
Yeah.
horrible, no, but I think we
Yeah.
need to know what we're, you know, because it's
Right.
not, if we're looking at it from a standpoint, in my opinion, of workforce housing or truly long-term housing,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I just want to be clear what it is what we're accomplishing.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, these are basically they're going to be apartment buildings.
As long as
Keep calling them hotels, but,
it could be a seasonal rental if it's a 90-day rental.
right.
That works.
Yeah, okay.
That works.
Yeah.
But the weekly seasonal rental would go against the long-term
The
theory here.
short-term rental versus seasonal.
Right.
This is,
Correct.
and that's the
Right.
transition
Yeah.
we're talking
Right.
about.
Okay.
So that, you know, that's gonna be clunky for administration to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to track.
Subleasing
Anyway.
was permitted?
Pardon?
Subleasing, is that permitted in this?
No, it is
No.
not.
Okay,
It goes back to that qualified person.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
okay. So
Okay.
does anybody else have questions for Kelly?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Did you want to speak this morning, John?
What you all just been talking about, good morning, I'm John DeLucia.
Hey.
Good morning.
What you've been talking about has not come up in any conversation that I've had with my client. The real fear was, the endeavor doesn't work out for some reason as a long-term. That was their real concern. I mean, we suddenly get enough housing here. I don't know if it's a magical thing or not, but in, 3 or 4 years, we may have some more apartment buildings, and we may have some more seasonal housing, and it may not make sense for this to be used as long-term. And so their desire was, look, we have a hotel, we're gonna renovate it, we're gonna run it, we'd like to convert it to the studio apartments. If that works, great, it'll be easier for us, really, than short-term rentals. And probably not as profitable. I'm pretty sure Leroy was right about that. But if that didn't work for them, then they would want to, convert it back. Being a special use, having to go through 3.5, 4 months of planning board and board of commissioners and public hearings, it's unlikely that anyone would try to do this seasonally. You'd be asking for a special use permit. First you'd ask to convert back, and then you'd be asking for a special use permit, so that at the end of the winter you could it would be silly. I just don't see anyone that would want to do that like on an annual basis or on a semi-annual basis. It would be arduous process. Other than that, we agree with everything that's in there. I mean, I believe that their intention, Leor's intention was to have them yearly, so, you're right, you're not gonna have the ability for the transient type. If they have a couple of rooms available for summertime and somebody wants to lease it for 90 days, lifeguards, we bring police up here from Greenville, I know, from the universities. They work here in the summer and they go back to the universities in the winter. That would be possible. It's probably highly unlikely, but it could be possible. And other than that, I'll answer any other questions you might have.
Anybody?
Thank you.
I do have one quick one. Do you have any feel for, or have you discussed with Leor about the challenge of monitoring the requirements of, I mean, Kelly said she doesn't have the staff to.
They've got, Beachmart Inc. has a great staff. They really do have a great staff that's behind. You don't see them behind Leor, but they're there. Wendy Ray, who's been Mr. Gallas's right-hand person for a long time, keeps pretty meticulous records and makes sure that
Right.
they're doing what they're supposed to do. So I don't think that that's going to be a problem. It may be a problem for Leor, but I don't think it would be a problem for the organization to manage that.
Right. Well, and any time that the staff would do, I guess it's sounding like it's turning into an annual audit, that should probably be
You can write that in.
part of the ordinance, I would think, that, it's going to be a snapshot in time, so it might likely matter when that occurs. I don't know what the solution to that is, but
I guess, would there be a better time of the year for that audit? And if it all didn't happen, let's say, right when you're going through budget review, is there a better time for staff as well? It probably lines up toward the end of the season?
Or the beginning.
Beginning of the season being now is bad because of, I imagine that's when budget review, there's a lot more administrative items going on now as compared to.
There is. I mean, I would envision this being more on the side of code enforcement. So depending on whenever we ask
right.
for those leases, it will be a duty of our code enforcement officer to go through and sort and
Mhm.
ensure that they're compliant, and if they're not, then take the next steps.
And they're probably never real quiet in code enforcement. And there's probably no downtime
There is no
exactly for them.
downtime, so it would just be something we would have to incorporate.
Right,
It's doable.
right. So, and as far as, I certainly understand your comments about it would be, you know, challenging to switch back and forth between the two uses. But we have to remember that we're looking at the ordinance in general, and it might not be, it won't be you, most likely, or, you know, once it's done. And so, and then how do we get, you know, it's the proverbial camel's nose under the tent, right? Because if somebody does it a year or two, then are we saying, well, obviously this needs to change again. This isn't working like this. They seem to be doing a little bit of this and a little bit of the other. So it is a, you know, cracking the door open to something potentially different than what we're looking at. You know, I think that this board, you know, before we knew it, it would be back in front of us and the BOC to say, you know, this isn't working exactly, but it's still kind of good, like you were saying. Is it bad to have it part, you know, seasonal and then winter? No, not necessarily, but it's not what's in front of us, you know, so. At any rate. Anybody else have questions for Mr. DeLucia?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. All right. So we have discussed it. If there's a motion, that's fine. I'll entertain a motion, or we can continue to discuss before.
Just a little bit, there are so many moving parts in this. There are so many places where it could be in someone's interest to nudge their specific situation within this framework, but it seems that the framework we've got is workable. If someone decides that they want to deviate from that path, then that will be a compliance issue. And the other side of it is understanding that this is kind of going on now, you know, these to some degree. So in an effort to bring behavior that is happening at some of these facilities more into compliance, this is, you know, we're herding things in a direction.
Mm-hmm.
That's the majority of the interest that I have in, as far as from where I'm sitting, but also to make the property more useful to the applicant and the other users. So those two things, that's where my concord on this is.
Mm-hmm.
Is it desirable? Who knows? You know, that depends on what happens. But that's what Chris Trimbley's gonna have to do. You know, that's gonna be the compliance and enforcement.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else?
Well, yeah, one question, Kelly, and this has to do with I guess back to the purpose of this whole ordinance thing. I mean, are we kind of looking also at legacy buildings? I mean, are we trying to make certain that these rascals survive? I mean, that they're able to continue. I mean, you know, financially, they're able to make it. I mean, I can't remember, honestly, I can't remember whether or not I know in previous memos you identified the locations where this would be acceptable, I think. And I'm wondering, of all the legacy buildings that we previously identified, the hotels, is this somehow, I mean, are we looking at all of them, or are we just looking at one of them, or several of them? I don't know.
So, yeah, that does come into play. We are looking at any hotel constructed in the C2 after 1974, I believe, or pre-firm, 72 or 72.
I think it's 72.
And so that's going to be 5 places within the town. So it certainly doesn't encompass what everybody might consider legacy, but it is for those 5. One has said that they don't have any interest in it. A couple of them haven't gotten back, and as Chairman Vaughn mentioned, one has said, yeah, we would be interested in it, especially for traveling nurses and other type of workforce. So, I think there was a policy from our comp plan in there that spoke to allowing, these legacy-type structures and non-conforming structures the ability to still thrive. I know I mentioned that in an early meeting, and Mr. Galassa assured me that they're thriving and they don't need this to keep thriving, so I haven't mentioned it since. But yes, there is an effort to acknowledge that it's an older historical legacy structure that we would certainly like to see maintained. And allowing some flexibility in this case was consistent with the land use plan.
I am hesitant to vote on it because of the way it affects the multifamily and what's coming down the road for multifamily. But it is a very special circumstance with the age of the buildings and the legacy buildings, and I don't want to be held to this standard of density for the coming multifamily rules that we set.
Yeah. I would agree with you on that too. It's a concern of mine that, and in that same vein, I'm not, because you're not trying to do it for this summer, certainly. It's not imperative that it happen right now. And so I see it as a piece of the puzzle, of the multifamily puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And, as we know, that's been tabled, and a couple of you are on the workforce that are gonna look at this. And I realize this is a different animal. It's, these old hotels, but I can't imagine if I owned property and I was getting ready to build something, I can't imagine not saying, well, you're letting this go on. You just allowed this, and now we're gonna have whatever restrictions, we land on, for the rest of us who are trying to develop property or, build something new. And so while I am not opposed to this idea, and I realize it's going on in other places, it's also going on in oceanfront hotels.
Yeah.
So, and that's, not being considered in this ordinance, and a lot of other things go on in town that we're not gonna just say, illegal duplexes, so we're gonna make all those legal because people are doing it, so I wanna be a little careful about that. I feel like while the proposal has a lot of merit, I'm just concerned about hammering out some of the details, because once we agree to it and adopt the ordinance, then it's pretty difficult to go back. And I just don't know why this has to happen right now, considering that the multifamily is on the table, so.
Can I play devil's advocate just for one moment?
Absolutely, please do.
I think it is a very commendable project, first. Second, I find that the one difference between this and the development of multi-unit family housing is that this is already multi-unit family housing, just short-term.
Right.
But it's hotel use.
Correct.
I mean, and I even wonder why are we gonna continue to call them hotels forever when they're apartment buildings, even though they're legacy structures, when we talked about legacy uses and all that stuff many years ago, I think a lot of us it was very difficult to separate the building from the use, and which is which, and it kind of died altogether, frankly. Any real comprehensive plan about legacy, structure, and use protection. So in my opinion, I know they're already existing, but short-term hotel use is, to me, a lot different than seasonal, long-term, 90 days, year-long. None of us know what's gonna happen, obviously, and so, but I have my doubts that there's gonna be a lot of people living in these things for 12 months or more. That's just a guess. I obviously don't know, because they're small and they're, from what I understand about the pricing, and it's not our job to talk about affordability or what have you, but unless they're really inexpensive, I can't fathom, when I didn't understand that that was gonna be like that, I can't imagine who's gonna stay in there for very long. They're small, there's no storage, you can't bring your own furniture, you know, all these things that we've discussed over the couple of months that we've been looking at it, but that's just my opinion.
We're finding this, as you say, it is one part of a solution of workforce housing.
Well,
There's not urgency right now for a final decision. And it does tie in with sort of the larger picture of workforce housing. But I think there's consensus that we like the idea, that it does satisfy a need for some long-term housing that doesn't currently exist in sufficient numbers. And I think that at least if we, as a board, indicate and let the commissioners know what we're thinking about this, still is a good move.
so am I hearing, well, Mr. DeLucia came up to the podium. Were you asking him a question, or did you just want to speak?
I just want to, when you said that there's no urgency for this, this won't get to the Board of Commissioners until April, maybe be heard in April, maybe be deferred until May. And we have a 3.5-month process
It's on the
to
agenda
put-
for,
to put a plan together, to come back to you.
Right.
You know, if they're gonna, the things that they still would have to add to these units would be the kitchens. I mean, right now, they have, I wish you would come down and see the hotel, it's beautiful inside what they've done with
I
it.
have gone by a few times.
But they've put in your standard things that you find in, you know, like the refrigerator and the microwave, and they just put those in at this point. They didn't buy the full kitchens. So, you know, in order to get those installed, to get everything ready and be ready for an opening first of the year and in the fall, there is some urgency. I mean, they're gonna run it as a hotel this summer. Normally by October, they're closed, you know.
And so there'll have to be a conversion time from the hotel. I mean, you can't be operating as a hotel and installing kitchens, except partially, I guess. So there must be a plan for that anyway.
Well, the plan was to try to do it all this winter, and they just,
Oh,
because it's taken so long to go through this ordinance process, they are just holding back. But, you know, we'll still have to submit, we'll still be going through 3 to 4 months worth, which puts us in August or September. That gives them a couple months to go in and start, you know, to make sure that everything is converted per this ordinance.
thank you.
I'm not saying I'm not gonna vote in favor of this, I'm just saying that I feel like voting, well, just, I don't wanna be held to this standard of density when I vote on
once-
something else.
I know, well,
Yeah,
and we're just making a recommendation anyway, so
Yeah,
we,
yeah.
you know, the BOC's gonna look at it, and they will look at it in April, because it's on the agenda.
It is.
There's a public hearing
Right,
scheduled,
so
so it's not gonna delay, well, I mean, they could table,
Well, they could table it.
yeah, I kinda doubt that would happen,
So-
because we, you know,
So to kind of create a distinction, there's a difference between short-term density and long-term density. Would that create, is that enough of a caveat to start to talk about, you know, how we see this? This is a transition from short-term density to something that is workable for a property owner for long-term density.
You might want to incorporate like a redevelopment versus new development?
Yeah.
That, I would, you know, they need enough from us to go to the Board of Commissioners in order for them to begin to start staging the conversion, which will happen September, October, going forward. And unless, you know, if I was in their shoes, I would want something in order to go back and say, okay, we've pretty much got, maybe not a total green light, but we've got enough indication that we'll begin to start making this investment now that we're gonna have to do in order to affect the transition
Mhm.
to this. So I can understand your position on that. And you need that lead time in order to be able to get this done. And the fact that we're talking about a redevelopment versus a new development should delineate the difference between what Molly and I are gonna be working on with workforce housing versus this.
Well, you know, but that's one side of this coin as I see it, and new development, but the
Right.
other side of it is densities, short-term and long-term.
Well,
So,
and
Well,
that's.
density is
I'm-
density,
I'm-
whether
I'm
it's
agreeing with
redevelopment.
you.
yeah,
I'm
exactly.
agreeing with you on that.
Okay.
And the density is the same whether it's new development or redevelopment. We're
Right.
still, you know, so,
I'm just trying to separate,
So,
you know, the long-term density versus the shorter-term density that we're talking about in this unique situation.
mhm.
so
Okay.
I'm
And I
making,
think we've done a lot of talk. Do
we
I hear a motion coming up?
yeah, motion.
Okay,
As submitted, yeah, that's,
to a motion
yeah.
to approve?
To approve, there are some caveats that might need to be carved into this as far as
Well,
compliance issues, you know, and I'm not sure that that is something needs to be included in this. I think it's more of a working item. But I do have a caveat about density and, you know,
well,
yeah.
if I'm not mistaken, if we make any substantive changes, then it's not moving forward in April.
Yes, so the change
Or
that I've heard that I
requesting
was going
change.
to incorporate was, staff will review leases on an annual basis to determine compliance. That was the revision that I've heard. I didn't hear anybody say that they wanted a cap of 1 conversion, 2 conversion, 3 conversion, that if we see this, because you're gonna see it, it's a special use. If you see the same person coming back annually, you're gonna start to say,
Right.
is this what we intended? So thus far, the only revision that I've heard that we wanted was the inspections, the staff doing an inspection of the lease agreement.
Yeah, that's,
Okay, so your motion is, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
please do. No, I always have a problem coming up with what the motion should sound like. Yes, with that accommodation,
About the lease,
yes,
about
exactly.
annual review, the leases by town staff.
Yes. So
Okay.
that's my motion.
So we have a
I think we all
motion
kind of
to
understand
approve
it.
the ordinance as presented with the addition of annual lease reviews by town staff. Okay, so we have a
Aye.
motion?
I have a question for Kelly. And I'm sorry, Kelly, and I am not an advocate of what I'm going to talk about, but I was wondering, and I'm not sure if John wants to participate in this or not, but my concern is, this is a new use coming into the town, basically. And I'm saying to myself, maybe if possible, we ought to take a closer look at this. And I'm looking maybe at 5 years down the road with a sunset provision in it. And I'm saying, I'm not, like I said, I'm not an advocate of sunset provisions, but because it goes to a lot of expense to the developer and, you know, et cetera. But I think that because it is a new use and because we haven't experienced this before, maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to kind of take a look at it 5 years down the road and say, hey, you know, you're compliant, you're not compliant, whatever.
So we can do that. I don't think that has to be written into the ordinance as much as just noted that, well, we haven't done a sunset clause in a really long time. And I'm not sure about the legality of it, but at any given time, we can go back and look at a use to determine if that use is still compatible within the town. We're gonna be doing that as part of the strategic plan anyway. So to note that as part of the planning board discussion, you know, there was, maybe some concern or hesitancy on the density allowances for this, given that it's an existing structure versus what the recommendation for new construction would be. That there's, some reservations about, it's a new use, there's a lot of unknowns, and the ability to, you know, in terms of enforcement, how is enforcement going, things of that nature, to revisit this in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, whatever we desire, to determine if this is functioning the way we envisioned it. I mean, it's always on the table. We can always come back and look at any use.
And then we'd be telling people who've been doing it, well, you gotta stop, like that's gonna
Not
happen. That happens all the time.
Or it is working.
Yeah, or it is working. I hope it does, you know.
To that, I mean,
So-
I guess I would say, if this happens, you know, essentially, if we were to decide that this use is not functioning in a way that we envisioned it, and we eliminated the use can still operate as a non-conforming use until such time that it ceases for a period of time where
Right.
it changes. So, you know, eliminating the use just means that this becomes a non-conforming use.
Mhm. Right,
It doesn't mean
doesn't
that
go
they
away.
have to like,
Right, so it
Pull
doesn't,
them
it doesn't stop
right,
necessarily.
But you
Okay,
could
so-
eliminate the use without the sunset clause too.
correct, yeah.
Right. So we have a motion on the table,
Okay,
and then we
okay.
had some discussion. Let's
Can
address
we
the motion.
Hear the motion again?
Wow.
I just want to be sure that we're all hearing the same thing.
I mean,
Then I'm
I'll be
hearing it
glad to
all.
repeat what I
Please,
think you
I beg you to.
It's my understanding that the motion is to approve the text amendment as submitted with the one addition of an annual review by town staff of the leases.
That's exactly what I would said if I was so
Okay.
good with words.
That's what you have, okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll second that.
okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Anybody? Okay, then we'll call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay? Nay? Okay, thank you, everybody. Moving on.
Just one name?
I think so. Mhm.
One.
Okay, so then we, thank you. We will move on. Bye, John. Thanks. We'll
Thank
move
you.
on to consideration of a text amendment submitted by Jordan Harrell of Jernigan Oil Company to allow the use of digital LED price signage at gas stations.
Let me expand this so you can actually see it. Okay, so this is a text amendment. It was submitted by Jordan Harrell of Jernigan Oil Company to amend the UDO to allow for digital LED signage for displaying fuel prices at gas stations only. So as you go through this, you're gonna realize they aren't asking for just a blank slate of digital and LED. They're asking for LED numbers only, not even letters, 16-inch tall max, 2 colors, et cetera, just for the purpose of displaying the fuel price only. So kind of jumped ahead, but I did want to mention that. So, and I think both Harolds are here today in the audience with us. But they did note that the primary reason for the request is for safety of customers and their staff. So there's been a lot of advancements in LED price signs. Obviously, you can change them remotely. Gas prices are changing. It's pretty fluid at this point. And having to have a staff person out there in the parking lots changing these, I don't know, the little digit replacements daily can put them in harm's way. So that's the primary thing there. There's also a convenience portion to it, and then we just live in an area with high winds where this is problematic, as you can imagine. Our UDO currently states LED and digital signs are prohibited, and then we do have the definition of digital sign in your packet. There's been a lot of discussion on digital and LED signage starting back in 2012. I won't go through everything, but I've given you the minutes from planning board meetings, conversations, staff reports, and board of commissioners meetings as well. From those, what I inferred is that there is an absolute concern with digital signage that is not regulated in terms of the type of digital signage, the intensity, brightness, location, etc. So when you see digital billboards, when you see flashing, scrolling, intermittent light, those are all things that I think the town has had a concern on. I even believe there's some land use policies that speak to that as well. But it did seem as though, as long as there were some regulations around it, that just static numbers for an LED pricer was within the realm of consideration. And I did note that in our staff recommendation as well. So the proposal here would be to amend section 10.22.6.17 to say LED and digital signs are prohibited with the new language except for digital fuel price displays as outlined in section 10.24.2.3.1 of the UDO. And then that's going to be our next section, where this is the section of the code that outlines the type of signage that's allocated within every district. So residential signage, commercial signage, etc. And here's the portion where we talk about commercial structures are allowed freestanding signage. If you're on a 5-lane road, you're allowed 64 square feet of freestanding signage. 2-lane, you get 32 square feet. So if you're on this 5-lane, which we recently did some text amendments to fueling stations, if you remember. So those are only going to be on the C2 and adjacent to 158. But it says you can have fuel price signage displays. Businesses engaged in the retail sale of gasoline may use manual changeable copy fuel sign displays or digital electronic fuel price displays on their freestanding sign. If utilizing digital electronic fuel price displays, the following conditions shall apply. The digital fuel price display shall not exceed 50% of the permitted sign area. The digital fuel price display shall be 2-color LED technology. And if you have looked through the applicant's information, they had already stated they would like to use a red for regular fuel and a green to designate diesel fuel. The digital price display shall have automatic dimming capabilities and shall automatically dim in response to ambient light. In no instance shall the fuel display cause light trespass onto residential districts or uses. The digital fuel price display shall display numbers only. There shall be no display of text, words, images, or animations. And the numbers displayed shall not exceed 16 inches in block digits. That I did not come up with. A lot of these are things that the applicant had already put in his application, knowing and understanding that there was a history of concern in Nags Head with LED signage, so trying to pare it down as much as possible for their needs only. So that's the extent of the staff report. Attached, you do have the applicant's narrative, some information that he had provided. Here you have the specifications for the types of digits that would be utilized, where we're talking about the 16-inch. You can see they've highlighted what they would use for regular and for diesel here. And then I thought this was beneficial. So this is their existing sign here in Nags Head. You can see these digits that have to be replaced. And then what they would be looking for and what they have in other locations is something of this nature. So the area of the signage doesn't necessarily change. 50% would be the max. It's just we're now looking at digital and LED. So there's no other type of digital or electronic displays up here. It's genuinely just the numbers only. And then, like I said, staff reports and minutes from previous board meetings, because digital and LED signage has been a conversation in Nags Head for quite a while. So that's my staff report. Like I said in the recommendation, I do think it's important to maintain the prohibition on LED and digital. I think this is one exception that can be considered because we can place some regulations on it that could be beneficial.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just curious, what other types of businesses are asking for LED and digital lighting?
We have not had anything other than gas stations request this. There's some banks that have time and temperature, which is already mentioned in here. I think if you go up 158 as it turns into 168 into Currituck, you see a lot of bright LED digital signs. There's like a Sound Feet shoes and like there's these different things that just
Right.
blind you when you're going through there at dusk and at nighttime. So keeping away from those things.
So down the road of Bright, there's a mention of dimmable. I'd love it if there was a number on something, because these things, LED lights, just in their character, there's a real point intensity, and it's distracting. If they were toned down and dimmed for density, if that impact was less dramatic, I think it would really help this to be much more aesthetic. The reason being, I understand that the applicant wants everybody to understand that, but what happens to me when I'm driving, especially at night, especially during dark hours, is I'm distracted by these bright lights. During the day, I understand they need to be that intensity needs to be there just for the message to be transferred. But at night, I'd love it if there was a number to tone
What it was
down
dimming to?
Yeah.
I think this includes those lights that go down.
It does,
Does,
but
but
there,
to where?
But to where? Like, is there a number?
level?
And I imagine in industry there's got to be somebody out there that's thrown a lumen's yardstick up to this and said,
Gotcha.
this is where distraction begins. That I'd like that. Just to that way, if there is an issue, and there was a complaint, it would be a compliance issue, and if that complaint, then maybe we could just kind of nudge that one way or the other. But as it is right now, it's up to the applicant to dim it, but it's still, I'm not saying that they want to distract us, but they want us to spend the money on fuel. So I get it.
Is the applicant going to speak?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Maybe they could answer
Well, let's,
a question.
Kelly, does anybody else have anything for Kelly?
Yeah, Kelly, just a question about other kinds of, not signs, but other kinds of lighting that we permit in the town. If, for a commercial building, if they want to do structure highlighting, perhaps that's not allowed digitally, but I'm saying, open signs, stuff like that. I'm just wondering, you gave a list of stuff that is like, kind of, these are the things that we have looked at in the past and things in the past. I'm just wondering, in terms of digital lighting, do we have, or LED lighting, do we have any, besides signs? I mean, and I know, I like I said, people, and Nags is very strict on its lighting standards. I know that. But I'm just saying that, I'm just wondering, what other kinds of digital lighting is permissible? Like open signs and stuff like that. Is that allowed? They're phosphor, or what are they?
So we don't allow neon, exposed neon signage. We don't allow flashing signage. We don't allow those types of things. If you see some neon signage out there, if you go look at it closer, it looks neon. It is not.
Okay.
We've gotten some complaints on that. But there's a list of prohibited signs that are in here. I think getting into the lighting ordinance right now might be a little outside the scope of this. I can certainly bring that back to you. We do have a really extensive list of prohibited signs. And let's see here. Use of exposed neon, argon, krypton, or similar gas tube lighting shall be prohibited. Three-dimensional sculptured signs and pictorial devices attached to and extending more than 12 inches. I will note the graphics at Sugar Planet are not 12 inches. We did measure those. Anyway, it's a long list. I won't go through all of it.
Right.
But, you know, no sign shall be erected containing rotating sign panels, obstructing visibility, nothing on telegraphs, telephones, telephone poles, things of that nature, so. Gary, I can bring back
No,
more
that's good.
information.
That's good, Kelly. Like I said, I was just trying to make sure we're being consistent here in terms of both our sign regulations and our lighting standards. So that was the question. So
Yeah, in terms of lighting, you know, we didn't put a lumen, a foot candle, a Kelvin. We didn't put that with this. Most ordinances just ask that it be dimmable to the ambient light around it, because whether it's nighttime, daytime, foggy, rainy, it's all going to change the dynamic. We'll have to work with the applicant if that's something that you want to move forward with, to put a specific number on. Looked at a lot of these codes throughout North Carolina, and I don't know that any of them have a specific criteria set, only that it is dimmable. But like you said, I'm sure that's out there, and if that's the desire.
That was kind of more my question was, is there boilerplate that anybody's using?
Yeah,
Okay.
and they may have some information on that as well.
Yes, so just to answer that question.
Sir, will you step up to the podium, please? Good morning.
Morning.
Hi.
We have to hear you.
We're going to put you on the spot.
Morning. Yeah, so they are all dimmable.
Can you tell us your name?
Jordan Harrell with Jernigan Oil Company.
Jordan, hi, thanks.
Nice to meet you. But yeah, they are dimmable to a certain extent, and it's a digital, inside the store, we actually have what they call a controller, that we can dim down to a certain level, which is what they call a percent. So we're happy to work with you guys to figure out what that is, what percent is appropriate for the town of Nags Head.
And if we, you know, once, I guess gives me exactly what I need. I'll wait until
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, like I said, we're basically what we're presenting is we want to be in accordance with the light,
Right.
what y'all have in place today.
Right.
Whether it be a percentage that y'all are looking for this particular amendment, we can
Right.
look into that. But we do have those controllers that allow us to dim those to a set standard.
And then they dim automatically
That's
based on
correct. Yes,
conditions,
ma'am.
okay.
Does any other town ask you to dim them at all? Like, have you ever had that
So
request?
it dims automatically,
Yeah.
but no other town is asking for it to go to a certain
Or
level.
special.
Okay.
But most everybody is happy with it. It's a very common thing.
Like, do you
as-
have it already in Kill Devil Hills? Like, do you have
We-
digital in Kill Devil Hills?
We do. So we have it.
Okay.
This is the only town that we do not have electronic price signs.
Right.
All right.
So we have 56 locations, and this is the 2 remaining sites that we can't
Okay.
change them remotely.
I can't say that in
He's
Kill
telling
Devil
us
Hills
that
is very
Nags is
offensive
special.
or anything.
That is correct. Yes, ma'am.
Understood.
No.
In the other 54 locations,
Yes, sir.
is, I'm sure a handbook comes out from Ahoskie and goes out to all the stations. And is it set at the same percentage at the other 54 locations?
It is. So it comes factory set from Able price signs, which
Okay.
if you can look through what I've sent out. But it comes to a certain standard.
Okay.
But to answer your question, we've never had anybody ask us to go under that standard. We've just gone with what is factory set. We've never gone and increased them, we've never gone and decreased them, but we do stay within the laws of the light ordinances.
How often do you change them generally? Just
It
curious.
all depends.
I'm just curious.
We try not to.
Daily?
Yeah, I mean,
Daily?
with the market,
Almost.
so I mean, the market changes daily, but we tried, and reading through the amendment, you can see that, I mean, in some towns, we're changing them 3 to 4 times a day. And there's just not staff for us to go out and do that. And if there is staff, they're out in the parking lot. I don't know, I mean,
Yeah,
if
I've
you've seen them,
Yeah.
but it's just dangerous, especially this location we have here. We're literally in the driveway. There's not a lot of room there. It's just,
Right.
but yeah, I mean, some locations, unfortunately, 5, 6 times a day.
I believe Wendy's now refers to this as dynamic pricing.
Something like it.
And it's done
Okay.
automatically?
It is. So we actually currently are, the price, typically the way it goes now is we actually push the price changes from our office. And then they go out to all of our, they actually change on the pump and on the price sign, as soon as we hit a button in the office.
The
Whereas,
Yeah, the real reason I think this is kind of interesting is because you could have other people say, well, I want to advertise my pricing through LED. And so, you know, when we have a understanding that this is happening so regularly, it's a different situation than what you're charging for boogie boards for the summer or whatever, you know, so. Okay, because they're called pricers, right? I mean,
Yeah, so this is specific to fuel pricing.
right.
There's
I mean,
no other type of,
So it's possible then that but you all can do manual changes, right?
that's correct.
So if we're just talking Nags Head, then the number to the left of the decimal point, we could set that not to go any higher than 1.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But we'll change the first number.
I did
I'll
See,
agree with that.
I think at that point they adjust the units that they're selling. It'll be lead per.
I appreciate-
We're gonna start selling liters instead of gallons.
No, I appreciated the visual display,
Yeah.
you know, but I did notice that the manual price was much less expensive than the
It's a
digital.
timing thing.
Yeah, okay. Timing's everything. Okay. All right. Does anybody else have questions for these gentlemen? Did you have anything else you want to tell us? Because you didn't really make a,
No, I mean, I, you know, what you have there, I mean, I kind of,
okay,
I mean, our biggest issue is of course safety.
right.
And we've really made a big push as the technology became available. We want to get our people out of the parking lot.
Mhm.
It's not good.
Well,
I mean,
and you did your application is very thorough and detailed. It helps us a lot. Thank you.
yes, ma'am.
Okay.
But is there any questions that you guys have for me?
Can't think of anything? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, what are we thinking?
My only concern is brightness.
Right.
You know, and this is something that I don't want to scratch the paint off the light ordinance, but you know I wouldn't mind going into that because technology in lighting is
Right.
very, very, very dynamic, and the problem with everything is how blue is the sky?
Right.
You know, so it's changeable. There's a gradients. So,
But
in
yeah,
another
what's before us
day,
today? Yeah, on another
in
day.
another day, I would love to get into that, but that's not my
But
concern.
did we want-
But at the same point, I think it is important that what if there are other dynamic pricing models in use in sales in this area, you know, if there's other ones that want to do something like this, we're precluding them, and that's understandable and okay because that's the way it's been. But at the same point, you know, do we want to? If we want to think about that later, I think that you know this is a good shot at it right off the bat.
I do feel like this is gonna apply to just more than duck through, so it would be nice to have a number for dimming at night. You know, it's gonna be on the Causeway, there's 2 other ones, there's the 7-Eleven, you know, it's not just duck through we're talking about, we're allowing this for
so
everybody.
it's actually
So-
part of the ordinance that to even have LED, it has to be automatically dimmable.
Okay,
To
so
the,
maybe we should find a number that we're
I'm
all
understanding that it's like an industry standard type thing, how they're dimming. So, but is there any way we can get a little more information? I mean, I'm not trying to delay this thing, I'm fine with it.
And I guess,
personally.
and that was
Yeah,
my.
But it'd be nice. I
That
mean,
was going to be my question to Kelly. If it becomes clear to a point that we in Nags Head like our lights dimmer for mood lighting for pricing, you know, then we push back against that and see if a concord can be reached. Because they seem quite amenable to
We have
this
to go
as
on
it
a-
is right
on a
now.
field trip.
The question is if we're being irrational in Nags Head.
Right.
And I don't mind being irrational as long as it's for a reason.
sure.
I would have 2 questions for Mr. Harrell.
Well,
Sorry.
you're fine. Come on back up.
One, what, do you know what the percentage of dim is from daytime to nighttime?
That would be an able question right off the
Okay.
top of my head. I do not know.
I think right now default in the box is 78%. If I
Reduction?
going through it.
So it's a
at
30
night, it automatically went to 78% on normal, and we could change that at any time, if
it's
you
a
see
22%.
that.
So it's a 22% reduction
Reduction,
from
yeah.
day to
Correct,
day.
yes, 22%.
But we can change it to 48% or whatever, and we're willing to work with the town and Kelly, and I date back into the late 90s or early 2000s with Kim Allen, and he would come to the site with his light meter, and I would have to spray paint over a light to make it darker. So I mean, I've got some history working with the town of Nags Head, and if you say it's too bright, then we'll go to the
So
site.
we'll call Kim and have him bring some spray paint.
Yeah, I mean, so
But-
it's.
But yeah, I
No.
mean, to that point, I mean, we're happy to get somebody out to the site.
And we don't know that for sure, really.
Well, and this is kind of, this is a little bit of terra incognita with us right now. We since nobody's seen an LED sign in town, with an ability to say that percentage could be dialed back, which is exactly where we need to go.
I can't believe nobody else has ever, because there are places with strict lighting regulations, stricter than ours, but you see this on
Well,
gas pricing, so.
But at the same point, I don't know if the industry would even want to pro-offer that stuff, because they want their signs
I'm
to
not
be.
talking about the industry as
Yeah,
much as other
Agreed.
municipalities or areas that
Well,
are doing it.
other
you know,
uses.
Nantucket.
Yeah.
That was what the chair lady pointed out is very important to me. I mean, I'm like, this is the proverbial nose under the camel's tent, the nose under the tent thing. And my thought is this, is that why gas stations? Why not, head shops or
Yeah.
whatever, beer places? Because why?
They change their prices 2 or 3 times
A
a
day.
day.
And I
But
guess.
that's their issue.
But I know that, but this
But
is
no,
how
what I'm
they
saying is
solve
that,
problem.
no, you can sell gum, you can sell cigarettes, you can sell whatever you want.
I guess, I mean, and I mean, that's why we kind of bring it here today, there's nobody going out in the parking lot to change the price of gum, if you will.
Right. I think it's-
And there's no, I mean, we've actually had I don't know if you've rode past or not only our station, but there are actually plastic pieces I mean, they're thick plastic pieces. I mean, we've had it hit cars, we've had it hit people. I mean, there's a safety issue.
You see it missing too.
Yeah,
Like, where did
a
it
lot
go?
of times, I mean, in Speedway, I mean, they have not made the push into technology quite like we have, because they have a lot more, but a lot of them, they don't even have, like, you might go by Speedway today, it might say 39 cents on it, because they're missing the 4, because it's down the road somewhere, or on the beach, or in the water, if you will.
Yeah, and I would assume that the technology is not inexpensive, so you're not gonna purchase it
But that's
to
the part of doing
advertise your-
business. I mean, that is what these guys do.
Well,
They're in this business. So I'm just saying that when they locate their sign, there has to be some concern about, okay, how are we going to change the message on this signboard? How are we going to do this?
Right.
So, I mean, my thought is that this is all, in my mind, I can see arguments coming down the road for why they need a digital sign. And they're going to point to the gas station. They're going to point to, oh, well, look, you allow it here. Why not allow it, to sell beer, cigarette, whatever it is that they want to sell? Why not? And that's going to be.
But at the same point, I'm not sure that, while I understand that, I'm not sure that this isn't the best case to bring it forward. Because if we can figure out how to come up with a model that works and understand where it doesn't work, and maybe even constrict it. As it is right now, this is a very, this is a single-use allowance.
Right.
On a commodity where the prices change more than daily, not even to the vendor, but to the barrel head of crude from various locations. So this is this is much more volatile than inflationary. This is because of global, is anything coming through the Suez Canal right now?
The spot market.
It's going around the tip of Africa. That's changing your pricing model. So there's a ton of volatility in this, and I understand that. My only point is to try to make it as available for information and non-obtrusive and distracting.
I guess if you don't mind just addressing how it came about and how we do it, let's say now in Nags Head versus other places. So if we decide that we're gonna change the price well, Columbia, just say, I mean, it's just a matter of 10 seconds. And within the next 30 seconds, it's at the pump, it's at the price sign, it's inside and it's changed. But in Nags Head, all right, we're gonna change at the same time, but we send an email to the store. So then somebody has to get the email. Let's say there's only one person working because we're really short of help. So then they see they got to change the price, but we're gonna have to wait till 5 o'clock this afternoon to change the price because I don't have anybody to go out there. Then I've got to go to the back and there's a box of them, these numbers that are plastic, and some of them are missing and they're cut. Then I've got to go outside with a suction cup. Well, it's a nor'easter and the wind's blowing 45 miles an hour. It comes off. We've had it hit them in the head, cut them. We had work comp claims. It just, with this new technology and the LED, the way it works, I mean, it just takes so much out of the equation. It's done faster. The sign is always up. It's never missing digits. And so that it eliminates them going out in the parking lot in the wind, and it changes it quicker. And if we want to change it, then it just happens so much faster. And to your point on the digits, I mean, we want them not as bright because if they're, say, bright, they wear out quicker, so then you have to replace them. So, and it does not take a lot at night for that thing to go. So that's why that thing, I think more or less, not because it's bright, but they got that thing dimming because it'll last a lot longer. Okay. And they're expensive. So we don't really want it dimmed, just as long enough as it's seen is kind of the case. But that's kind of the difference of how the technology came about, as far as it's very antiquated, having to go change it with a suction cup as many times as it happens in a day or a week.
I would assume you have staff that's maybe not even physically capable of doing it. You might, or it would be a challenge for them.
Correct.
You know, so I think we're hearing that we're pretty interested in this. The question to me sounds like, do we want to address the issue of the level of brightness, if you will, the lumens or whatever, on LED level before we move forward, or are we going to just see how it goes?
I can tell you, I can come back next month and try to give you some numbers on the percentages, if that's what you would like to see.
I mean,
Unless anybody wants to make a motion as it is. I
I'm
think-
comfortable with making the motion as it is, and if we find it to be too bright, then we communicate with people, or put it in an ordinance that there's a percentage that we need to go to.
We can do some,
I'm
we can
not-
do minimums and maximums.
Okay, so are we having an actual motion, or just got, do you made a motion
Well,
to,
I don't know, my question
Okay.
is, can we come back, if we're unhappy with the brightness, after we make this motion, like after it's all in place, can we come back and say, we need to reduce the percentage at night for all these gas stations?
they're nice,
Yeah.
they're nice, they're gonna say yes, we'll reduce it.
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, it's a conversation with them.
Yeah.
If we do this and it is too bright and there's concerns, we have the conversation with, to what percentage can you lower this?
I guess maybe if right now, if you could include would it be possible to include those numbers? Or
She
no,
didn't know the
existing
numbers.
standards, use existing standards in the ordinance, or in a proposal, and then if existing standards are a problem, then we can kind of jump off that.
So there is no existing standard for an
No,
LED digital sign.
But there is the industry standard, I'm sorry,
Basically,
the existing,
how it comes out of the box.
yeah,
Right.
the existing industry standard, okay.
I'll make a motion to approve as submitted.
Do you have so we have a motion and a second to approve the text amendment as submitted. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay? We have one nay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. You're welcome.
We're 2 nays in a day. This is a good day. I'm happy about
that.
I
It's
understand.
the same
What's
as
gonna
the
happen,
hotel.
what is gonna happen, Molly, is
Okay,
that
we're
we're
gonna-
gonna start seeing these damn signs
Me.
all up and down the highway. And if you're
Yeah.
one of those businesses, you're gonna see, there's gas stations right down here. It's
Okay,
got a big
We're
digital
gonna
sign.
move on to, we are going to
Same
move
thing.
on
Same
to
I don't like the
discuss
hotel concept
and
either.
request initiation of text amendments related to the installation of netting as a barrier to prevent golf balls from leaving the boundaries of the golf course.
Oh, Lord.
Kelly, you're up again.
Yeah, this is gonna be really quick. All I need from this.
Be careful what
hopefully,
you wish for.
Already? Yeah.
Is, so this is just a request for initiation. We received a email or phone call a while back from, Mr. Muller. He lives on Bob White. It's adjacent to the golf links, but it is not part of the village of Nags Head. It is not part of the SPDC. And he is getting quite a bit of property damage to his home, to his vehicles from stray golf balls. He reached out to the town, you can see through the email chain, about what the town could do about it. And there's really nothing that we could do about it, but we brought it up to Nags Head Golf Links, where their general manager said it's incumbent upon the golfer to report the damage. It's a process, we'll have to go from there. We recommend this person explore landscaping, netting, etc. So that's exactly what Mr. Muller came to us with. There were some links in here to what he would like to do. He wants to essentially plant a tree barrier where he's getting most of this damage, but it's going to take a while for those trees to get to a height that it's going to benefit him. So he was looking at purchasing some netting, which you can get from Amazon, and installing some telescoping flagpoles to attach it to. Mr. Muller was notified that this was going to be on the agenda today. He was unfortunately out of town. And he did provide some information from his scenario only, and not everyone's, but for his. The home is not a rental home. It is a second home. When he is here at this home, this will go up. The netting and the flagpoles will go up, predominantly if it's a high golf season. But it's not going to be a daily or a year-round thing. It's something that he can put up and take down as needed. So that would have to be a consideration as well. Obviously, we don't want this up in high winds, hurricanes, things of that nature. But right now, we don't have anything in the ordinance that would speak to the maximum height of this. There's really nothing there. So I have reached out on NC Plan to see if other locations deal with this. And I got a lot of responses of, hey, can you forward your replies back to us because we're interested too. I think in a lot of areas where maybe the residences were there and then the golf course came after, there were some requirements that the golf course provide the landscaping and the netting, but that's apparently not the case for Nags Head Golf Links. So this is a private property owner just trying to take some mitigation efforts into his own hands, and we just don't know how to address it until we dive a little deeper, so.
If you're a second homeowner though, and you're not here all the time, I mean, how are you taking that up and down when it's high winds or?
He would only he says he will only put it up when he's there, so if he's here for the week, he will.
But that's not going to prevent his
home from
damage
being
that's happening all
damaged?
the time.
Yeah.
Correct, but it's going to prevent the damage to his vehicles.
Oh, I see.
Oh, his vehicles, but he says his siding and things
Their
too.
siding, windows, vehicles.
Yeah.
I would like to
You
say,
live on a golf course.
yeah, I would like to say
But he,
that I volunteered at that course for a period of 6 years, and I've played that course many times, and I know exactly what he's talking about. And off that fourth tee box on the second shot, there are a lot of balls that veer off to the left and go into that property. And I, in fact, at one point in time, when that house was for sale, my daughter looked at it. And I did see the damage, and I said, you don't want any part of this. Because I was well aware of about where the majority of the balls go out. So my house has been hit, but I expect that because, you know, I knew that I live on a golf course, you know, and I've got 8 golf ball dings in my 4Runner sitting right outside that are beyond repair. So I do know the damage that can be done. And in the golf links, there are people that have decks that face the golf course, and they put some screening around that attached to their deck. So there are places where netting is appropriate. And this gentleman, yeah, that's the house.
So he just
Yeah.
emailed these to me, I apologize.
Those are the golf ball dings in his siding.
When he was there before the course,
And
correct?
he also has, on the other side, a swimming pool.
He wasn't there.
He wasn't,
But,
He's a third owner or something.
yeah, well,
but still, it doesn't mean it's not an
Yeah,
issue.
yeah, I know,
Could-
yeah.
Do we have
So-
any example of what the, it'd be good to look at the netting.
Sure.
you know,
Yeah, it was in the packet. I'll pull it
Oh,
up.
I didn't see
yeah, we
it,
have
sorry.
some.
It looks like crab netting, but it's
Yeah.
black.
It does.
Let me say this, and this doesn't have much to do with his problem, what it does. Where that house sits, that's the tee shot that is hitting that house. And these are awful golf shots.
Well,
These
so-
literally have to go off the tee at a 45-degree angle
Does Nerf,
to the left.
is there a
to
Nerf
hit
golf
this
ball that
house.
we can ask them to use off that tee?
So there's a
I'm
lot
kidding.
of awful golfers playing apparently.
I mean, really awful.
Yeah,
Yes.
this is resort
Well,
golfing.
but, and
Yeah.
this is going to be, this is probably also exacerbated by wind. You know, a bad shot in bad conditions is a worse shot.
I mean, every house along that street complains about golf balls, I
Yeah,
will say.
absolutely.
That
There-
little dirt road, yeah.
There are a couple of small live oaks between the gravel road that runs parallel to the fourth fairway. On the village side, there are a couple of small live oaks. These golf balls are going over those live oaks and into his property. And if he does plant trees along there, it would be a help, but where, if you look at the pictures that he just emailed you of where those
Yeah.
dings are on his house, that's 30 feet up in the
Yeah,
air.
there's some, I used to work for a golfer, and I'm a little surprised that the golf course itself hasn't already got, the difference between what he's describing and what his problem and other more challenging golf courses is those trees make it more challenging so that they make it difficult, that hazard becomes playable. It may, makes adjustments. So why don't, if this is off the tee, I can't imagine that there shouldn't be a reason or a way that the links shouldn't be able to have a smaller bit of landscaping, tree, lower, closer to the tee box, so that something like this couldn't be allowed. But at the same time,
I
the
will
other,
answer that.
go ahead.
The golf course is not gonna spend a dime doing that.
Okay.
Because they're not liable for that.
Right, and
The
of course,
golfer's liable for that.
and what's before us is an initiation of a text amendment to,
Yeah.
about netting barrier.
Is there any, but the other question is there anything, does the village of Nags Head have anything, is this in the village?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. So, yeah.
The best thing to do would be, what he's suggesting, and then find some trees that grow very quickly, I don't know if they're, juniper or some sort of
I think
foliage
he's
trees
suggested
that
something.
grow a lot more quickly than the live oaks that he could put in there.
So
Oak
so
area.
am I hearing that I think it sounds like we're willing to initiate a text amendment or recommend initiation of a text amendment to look at this?
The only other caveat that I have, concern I have is, birds. Is this are we, is there, I'm not familiar with the area, is there any are there gonna be a bunch of birds flying through here? Is it gonna net some birds? Is it going to contain some wildlife?
That is a reasonable
Yes, we do
concern,
have some ospreys in
because
there.
we have a lot of birds down here.
And as every bit of
Bats.
that netting that I saw there goes the whole way to the ground, and he's not concerned about the damage low, it's all higher.
I know, he's like, are we gonna allow a 30-foot high net? Is that what he's asking? Because that's a really high house.
Yeah, part of the conversation. We would have to
Yeah,
come
but
back with
again, we're just
recommendations.
initiating,
Okay,
right?
we
So
can-
we're
It's
not
20
making a decision
20 feet
today.
high and 30
And
feet
30
wide.
feet long, yeah, that's what I thought,
20
That-
feet
and,
high.
You know,
20 feet high.
this, my concern as much as anything else is this an endangered species? You know, could this be a violation of some other type of, you know, if you, God forbid, they get an osprey, or something more, you know, more endangered, so.
Well, all the more reason if it's only gonna be up while they're there, rather than a permanent structure.
But
a
even
permanent
if it's
thing.
up while they're there, it's still a violation.
Well, I agree, maybe. So,
Yeah.
I mean, but that would be part of the consideration of the whole text amendment, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is honestly just in the beginning. I'm
Right.
asking for
Okay.
y'all to initiate it as opposed to having him initiate it, because this serves to help others and not just him.
Yeah.
So if this is something that others will take advantage of and can be beneficial for others, we need to acknowledge that, so.
So, and then
I
the-
personally think we should initiate it, at
I-
least we can consider. we
Yeah.
can
And then
continue.
the other allowance that I would make is to either try to figure out if you can make it so that it's easier to the animals to see and accommodate, would be good. So that it's not, I mean, this time of year, we all have birds flying into windows. Some of them don't make it. The owl in New York City, may we all take a moment of silence.
Mead, you can speak to this. Would deed restrictions allow this within the village of Nags Head?
Well, first you'd have to
Probably
get,
not.
well, no, first you would have to get
Probably
the
not.
approval of the board.
The
village
ACC,
board.
yeah, the village ACC would have
Correct.
to review it.
Right,
My thought
Right.
is the ACC would actually not
No.
approve this. So I
Okay.
don't believe this is something that would benefit people inside the SPDC district. This would be for those on the perimeter.
That's kind of what I was asking.
Right, we get pounded.
Yes, you do.
We
Right.
get pounded. So, I mean, some houses there that are right on a tee box,
Mhm.
they're fine. But beyond that, you're subject to get hit.
Every golf course probably like that.
Every golf course property has that.
But you get a huge benefit too. I mean, and the benefit is like open space. It's like the ocean. It's like that, I mean, I'm just saying that there is a huge benefit that goes with building your house as close as you can to the golf course. There is a benefit.
I'm not
Right.
denying
I,
that.
Right,
well, I'm
okay.
just saying that there, I mean, I
That's
think
how
we
we
need
got
to
all those
balance
houses
this a
all
why I
little
close
bought
bit.
there.
together.
Well,
Right.
I'm just saying that I'm just saying we need to balance this a little bit with.
Okay, so do we want to initiate the text amendment?
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay,
yes.
we don't need a motion on
Initiate.
that, right? Just
No,
initiate,
just consensus
initiate
to
away,
initiate.
please.
Yes.
We have consensus to initiate,
Mhm.
in my opinion. Okay. Thank you. Let's move on to Board of Commissioners actions, not from December 6th, though, from, just fine.
Yes, so we had some old commissioners' actions uploaded. I gave you the March ones this morning, and we've since updated these online, so. Real quick, so at their March 6th meeting, our Art and Culture Committee gave a presentation about the events at Dowdy Park, how it went last season, what we're anticipating for the upcoming season, and some of the big projects they're working on, so that was exciting. Art and culture is part of planning, which is why I included that.
Naturally.
We had requests for public hearings for the hotel item, which we heard this morning, as well as consent agenda to prohibit driving over septic systems when they're adjacent to driveways, which we'll talk more about that in a minute. The board adopted the ordinance to amend the UDO prohibiting drive-through restaurants as it was presented. And they did appoint the working group for the multifamily discussions. So Board of Commissioners is going to be Mayor Pro Tem Sears and Commissioner Lambert from the Planning Board. We've got Mead Gwynn and Molly Harrison. From the community, we have Basil Belches. From the business owner standpoint, we have Chris Greening from TW's Bait and Tackle. Outer Banks Home Builders Association, Duke Garrity, Outer Banks Association of Realtors, Donna Creef, and I believe our first meeting is coming up on March 25th, is that correct? So, that's not too far out. And the board appointed Joe to the Rural Transportation Coordination Committee with the Albemarle Regional Planning Organization. So he'll be attending those meetings now. We've had not the best attendance at those because there's not a whole lot of there for us. But we do still need to be engaged, and this is right up Joe's alley. He loves transportation things. He's gonna love it.
I just saw you with a wicked train set, but anyway, that was me. Yeah.
And that's it.
Okay. Anybody have questions, comments? Go team on the working group.
Yeah.
Yeah, keep us posted, please.
That's an interesting makeup.
Okay.
Yeah.
All righty. So that is that, unless anyone has questions. Town updates. Nothing's been requested on that. Let's move on to discussion items. Discussion of a text amendment to prohibit driving over and/or parking on septic systems when adjacent to driveways, drive aisles, and parking areas.
Yes. So, at your last meeting, we presented a draft text amendment that was going to require some type of physical barrier be provided when you have your driveway, your parking aisle, turnaround, et cetera, adjacent to your septic system area, your septic and drain field. And there was consensus that that was a good ordinance. We talked about how, is there a way to limit the impact of this? Because the way it was written, every new single-family dwelling and every property undertaking a substantial improvement was going to have to provide this barrier. That ordinance is scheduled for public hearing in April, but we did think that of a way where there's not as much potential impact to property owners who may not have any intention whatsoever or have ever had a problem with parking on their septic, and that would be to amend the UDO to expressly prohibit outright parking on your septic system and drain field. Once that amendment is in the code, if we saw it happening, it would then be an immediate notice of violation. You are now in compliance with this section of the code. This is how you have to remedy that. Part of that is going to be installing this barrier that we've outlined. So it's a little bit less proactive, but we're not penalizing people for something who never intended to park on their septic system. So
Or don't have a
it's more
problem.
retroactive, but there's more enforcement with it. It's just a consideration. I wanted you guys to talk about it, to see if there's interest in proceeding, continuing the previous text amendment on its path, pulling that one and focusing on this one, or looking at a combo.
I find that sort of problematic because you have, you could have 50 different people coming to one house and they don't know where the drain field is.
Well, they should, maybe. If you have 50 people
They don't
coming.
even know what a drain field is.
I know, but I mean,
Yeah.
if they're routinely parking on them, that's the problem. And in my opinion, I like this because
the
otherwise how are you
idea-
gonna capture the existing situations?
Right.
But
I mean, all we're doing is making a
town staff
rule.
gonna ride around and look for like
That's-
people parked on
We do
septic
now.
fields?
I mean, it's
Uh,
part of what we do now.
Okay.
So
On the
in this
weekends? And-
scenario,
okay.
if
Well-
we're made aware, so today, if we're made aware of it happening, all we can do, because it's not in our code, we have no enforcement mechanism. We can ask them to move, and we can call the Dare County Health Department.
Or you can call the
And-
property manager,
or
which
the
that happens too.
And by
Right,
the
sure.
time this happens, it's
It's
too
not a
late. But in this scenario, if we see it happening, it's an immediate notice of violation to the property owner, notice to the rental company, and then the barrier has to be installed. So hopefully it happens one time and not after that.
I agree with you. People don't know where they are. That's
Well,
the
I don't
problem.
know they
but-
exist.
And they don't know what they are.
But,
Yeah,
but as
so-
well, to that end, this could create a situation where it would become incumbent upon the property owner
To educate.
to
Right.
have a placard someplace say, "Don't do that."
Right.
So this might put the onus more on the property
Right.
owner.
That's
and-
true.
And
which is
rather
good.
than someone who's building a home with a septic somewhere that you could never drive on if you tried.
Right, I do,
You know,
yeah,
I
I can
mean,
see that,
that's-
like, if you could get, and then it would be for all owners, not just the new ones.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, if it wasn't part of the ordinance, I can see that.
Correct. It's a way, like I said, it's a little less proactive and more retroactive, but once the problem is identified, we have a solution.
Right.
There's no way to put this in an ordinance, but moving forward, when we get a new single-family dwelling, we're gonna condition it, you know, no parking on your septic system.
That's part of it.
Included in next year's budget, we're gonna have some signs that we can hand out to people, just small little, about the size of the, you know, the Nags Head bumper stick, bumper
Yeah.
thing
Right.
that just says
License
no
plate.
parking on septic, that we can just hand out to people, some educational efforts, but the main concern was that we were going to be, the previous ordinance had the potential to impact a lot of people unnecessarily, whereas this one will affect those that are the offenders.
Would it be, and this is for ease of use, would it be possible moving forward on new installations, or even where you're, put it on GIS? So you could pull up a map and it'd be a resource that would be available on a screen in every vehicle that the town had with access to that, so you could see exactly where it was. That way, if somebody had a complaint, you would be able to say, no, it isn't a problem, they can park there.
Yeah,
Or it is a problem
so
because they can't park.
interestingly, we are going through the budget process right now, and every year we look at what did the DWMP, the Decentralized Wastewater Management Plan, what were those recommendations? Because there were about 20 of them, and they had them listed year by year. So what were the recommendations of the DWMP? And one of them is GPS locating septic systems, and then having it on a platform that's available internally or possibly even externally. So right now we have Connor Twitty and 2 contractors that are doing these inspections. Connor does probably 30% of them. He divvies up the rest to the contractors. So the idea now is that in this next budget cycle, with the help of Joe and his GIS and GPS knowledge, we're gonna purchase a GPS locator, a very nice one. And we're not gonna be able to ask the contractors that do these inspections to go GPS locate. But when Connor gets an inspection, which I said he's doing about 30% of them, when he goes out to do that inspection, he can get those coordinates and bring those back so that we can map them. As we do new single-family dwellings, we can map them. You know, it's gonna be an ongoing effort. It's not going to happen overnight. But we're slowly but surely have a plan to get these coordinates so that we can map it. And Joe's got some really great ideas on how to do that visually. So that's perfect. Like what you said, falls right in line with what we're attempting to accomplish this next fiscal year.
Great minds think alike.
Be careful.
Okay, so what are we thinking about this, about kind of heading in this direction rather than what we looked at last month, I guess it was?
I like it.
I do too.
I like it because it makes it's more of line crossed instead of,
Right.
you know, we don't know, now you're in a
At least
gray,
it-
we'll let
right.
you know when you're in a black over the line. I kind of like it. I know it's a little bit more on staff to do this, but it's going to be on them anyway.
Right. Well, yeah, it's already on them, frankly, and to some degree, you know.
It gives
And
us
I-
more teeth.
I agree
gives
with
us more
Molly that
enforcement.
people don't know
This
where
is-
they are, they park on them.
This is something I'm dealing with at work. So much of what you do with planning is all carrot, no stick. This is a little bit of a stick.
Yeah.
And
Well,
you would
it'll
have
force
to-
people to, I have a friend who knows someone who has this problem chronically at their rental home, and they just don't want to address it because it doesn't come down on them until the septic fails, right?
Right.
Which,
Then it
you know,
really
but I
comes
mean,
down on them.
so, you know, this kind of forces people to take some kind of action. And I think it'll be good if it's not real strict about what you do to either mark it or block it. You know, it doesn't have to be, you know, a concrete wall or whatever. I like the painted half tires.
And it really
personally.
is more like an education thing. It's like, Homeowners should know better than to let people park there.
Right, but they're not, they're absentee, it's out of sight, out of mind, or they don't want to burden their guests with, oh, you can't park there. The guests are parking there because they don't want to stack their vehicles in a,
And at this, at
it's
the
all
same,
about parking, frankly, let's face it, but we won't go there.
but at the same time, if did I
Lack of
know where
parking.
my septic field was when I bought my house? No, I had no idea. It wasn't until I started messing with something else that it was even of a
Right.
concern. So I think this is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this is a more clear line than the other line.
Okay,
Okay, we'll move
So you
forward
think
with
you're-
this one.
Okay,
Mhm.
sounds good.
you're good on that, great, thank you. And then you can stay right up there, I guess, is there anything in your director's report that we didn't already cover somehow?
We've actually talked about, I'm happy to delve into something if you have questions, but
Anybody have questions on Kelly's report,
I
or?
think we've touched on most all of it. I'll give an update. It's not good, it's not bad with the EV action plan. We're still gonna do the level 2 chargers. We just may have to look at a different location. Here's why. And I just recently found out about this. That whole area out there has geothermal under it. And so Low Wire came out to run the electric, and when we were looking at utilities, it's like, oh, we have something under here. We pulled the geothermal plan. It's not an as-built, it's what was proposed. It's probably relatively accurate, but we're gonna have to have somebody come locate everything so that we know that we are gonna be okay there. So
Right.
worst case scenario, we're bumping it to a different location and not the 2 that we told you.
Okay,
But we are still moving forward with it.
so that's good to know, so you can't put them, how close to geothermal, just if it's right under there where that was going?
We'll have to figure that out.
This is a little bit of a thing I've messed with. Geothermal, a long time ago, you used to be able to do it you could do things over, you could put it under a driveway a long time ago, now you can't do it.
Right, right, so,
So in some of it, I think as time moves on and as geothermal becomes more acceptable and useful, I think that everything in the industry has changed except the code.
Kelly, I have a question about, just about sand relocation. I've noticed that, there's a couple of places in town where people literally have, cut through the dune, they don't want their dune in front of their house. Is that allowed?
No, it's not allowed to lower the
Uh-huh.
dune. If it's a 6 to 10 foot perimeter around a structure,
Uh-huh.
your home, your pool, your walkway, you're allowed to cut into that.
Uh-huh.
But beyond that, they should not be significantly lowering the dune. So,
Maybe it was prepping for stairs or something.
um,
I'll give them the benefit of the doubt.
if you want to
No,
send
I'm
me
not
some
gonna-
we'll talk after the
messages.
meeting?
Kelly, is that true for nourished beaches?
Yes, so the sand relocation program was spurred out of our CAMA permit for beach nourishment.
But cutting through a dune, though, if it's a nourished beach, I thought the state was a little bit unsure.
No, we just said you can't cut through a dune.
Okay,
That's
you-
not permitted, yeah. So
That's what I thought, but then
Yeah,
again,
no.
I thought that the state was DCM was giving a different interpretation of that,
That you can cut through?
that you
there?
can cut through.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that. Our sand
No,
relocation.
that wasn't that long ago. That was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. They were talking about allowing, for beach nourished beaches, for areas that had beach nourishment, then the dune could be you could lower the dune, yes.
Our program does not allow us to lower the dune. So what we're offering through our sand relocation program, it does not allow us to lower the dune.
Okay. Anybody else have questions for Kelly on her report?
Off topic, but they allocated $320,000 for the grant. We're already at the $320,000, and Lily continues to get grant applications. in.
Oh, boy,
Yeah,
lots
We'll
of them,
have to,
really.
we'll have to deal with that.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just outreach on letting people know how to do things better, just, that is
Key.
so good as compared to, the Wild West of, I get to figure out what to do with my dune line. it just, there are better ways to do things, and just to have that out there is very useful.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. Members'
you.
agenda? I didn't hear anything from anybody. Anybody got anything they want to bring up? I only had one thing I really want to mention today, and that is that some of us served previously on this planning board with Mike Riley. I think you did.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just us, and maybe you remember Mike Riley, Kelly, I'm sure you do, but he passed away, and I didn't hear about that right at the time, but it was, I think, in early March, or that's when I saw it. So at any rate, I just wanted to mention some of us worked with him, and he'll be missed. He was
He
an
was
integral part of this board.
It was really, it was one of his point of view was always very interesting. He would come up and it was, from a completely different point of view, and that was very, very nice.
Yeah.
And I do remember working with him.
Yeah, he's an engineer.
Yeah.
And he had and he was, he was he actively participated in all the meetings too, and I only served with him for about a year, maybe two, I don't know, but anyway.
And this is, remember at that time, a planning board meeting was an hour. If it was longer than an hour, you were in trouble, and you were told that,
To-
you know.
yeah. Just be quiet. At any rate, so Mike will be missed. And I wanted to mention that, and that's all I have today, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, we are adjourned then. Thank you.
We got out of here in under an hour.